Hi, my name is Matthew Jester. Please watch my video, Hypnosis, Abuse, and Speech Inhibition. I will leave a link in the description. I will also leave additional links in the description of other relevant videos. I've been abused with hypnosis, and my ability to speak is being inhibited with hypnosis, which is why I have to read everything when I make videos. If you hear me stuttering, if you notice me stuttering, speaking slowly, being unable to speak clearly, or any other difficulty speaking, I explain how this is being done to me in my other videos. In my other video, Hypnosis, Abuse, and Speech Inhibition. This is an organized crime operation investigation that has identified and obtained an overwhelming amount of various forms of evidence directly related to a series of letters that were sent to the celebrity Billie Eilish that were perceived to be threats of death. The evidence indicates these letters were premeditated by a third-party organized criminal operation that utilized hypnosis to discreetly control and silence victims and witnesses. The evidence indicates that the letters written by John Matthew Hurl were actually warnings of death, not threats of death, and that John Matthew Hurl was inhibited by hypnosis while writing them. This is the article we're going to be referencing. And let's see. So in this video, I'll be covering some very basic handwriting analysis concepts and also cover how these concepts can be used to help identify various patterns in handwriting that can indicate the handwriting was or may have been influenced by hypnosis. This is different than standard handwriting analysis used by the FBI to identify if two samples of handwriting were written by the same person or two different people, because it will be identifying whether the patterns of alterations produced by hypnosis in my handwriting are also found in John Matthew Hurl's handwriting. This is only a small portion of the evidence. I discuss the majority of the evidence in my other videos, Hypnosis and Drawings, Hypnotic Inhibition of Speech, and Letter Content, and lastly, Billie Eilish's death threats and post-hypnotic suggestions. I also elaborate in further details regarding handwriting analysis and hypnosis and handwriting advanced. In fact, the easy part was discovering the third-party involvement because I was told about it multiple times before it had happened. The difficult part is disclosing the evidence. Moving on. So, first of all, hypnosis was used to teach me to change the letter formation and structure of my handwriting. So, I will go over some examples of that here. You can see the before and after. I'm going to go over in details, like the specifics and what they did, some of the reminders that they used with hypnotic cues to make me remember how to change it. So anyways, there were also some specific muscle contractions that I identified in my handwriting that were caused by hypnosis. So, brief, unexpected, abrupt muscle spasms producing an abnormal line formation protruding off the letter structure, resulting in an unacceptable variation from correct letter formation. The alterations in handwriting caused by the brief muscle spasms would be singular pen stroke abnormalities were often over 5 times the length of standard pen strokes and oftentimes would cross over multiple baselines. So, the baselines are, the lines that you're writing on a line piece of paper, as an example. And, that this would be an example of, how the muscle spasm would protrude an abnormality in the line formation of the letter structure. So, moving on from that, that's one sample. The second type of muscle contraction that I experienced through post-hypnotic suggestion replicated the presentation of carpal tunnel or writer's cramp. Basically, like where your hand is cramping specifically right here. It's difficult to point out. On the left side, right here, yep. Right here. Anyways. So the second type of muscle contraction that I experienced through post-hypnotic suggestion replicated the presentation of carpal tunnel or writer's cramp. Focal dystonia is the technical terminology used to describe the involuntary muscle contractions that are longer in duration, such as writer's cramp. In order to identify focal dystonia, the pen stroke irregularities have to begin and end in a sequential order that is consistent with the duration of the prolonged muscle contraction, and the pen stroke alterations have to be capable of identifying a loss of motor control with features such as a significant lack of accuracy or precision, distortion of line quality, deformities in letter formation, abnormal frequency of mistakes, and a deficiency in neatness and or legibility. In comparison to a standard sample of the individual's handwriting, increased size and pen pressure can indicate overcompensation for loss of motor control because longer pen strokes require less precision and accuracy. The shorter pen strokes and increased pen pressure can restrain some uncontrolled movements by restricting the range of motion in the wrist and hand, as well as concentrating pen stroke pressure to control shaking. If the alterations lower the quality of the handwriting, then the alterations were most likely undesired and unintentional, which significantly limit the amount of logical explanations and possible causes other than the loss of motor control. I first discovered this was occurring as a result of post-hypnotic suggestion when I began recording myself writing a witness statement regarding a murder I witnessed, and although I noticed my hand cramping while writing, I believed it to be caused by overuse until I watched the video I recorded afterwards, and I noticed my hand suddenly and abruptly started cramping as soon as I began writing the word murder, and then suddenly and abruptly stopped cramping as soon as I finished writing the word murder. If this incident never occurred, I never would have developed the ability to recognize and identify the alterations in John Matthew Hurl's handwriting specifically. Distraction and confusion were utilized by post-hypnotic suggestions to depotentiate conscious awareness in order to elicit the writing of an entirely different word than I intended or desired to write, and the same technique was used to elicit a variation in line thickness in a letter or of a word by increasing pen pressure and or retracing the pen strokes that comprise the targeted letter until upon discovering the alterations in my handwriting were not only caused by hypnosis, but were also evidence of hypnosis altering my handwriting, and developed a very specific technique to collect that evidence. Before I began collecting the alterations in my hand, hold on a second. I'm going to have to use this video as an example. But let's see. Hold on just a second. Before I began collecting the alterations of my handwriting as evidence, I would simply erase and rewrite the word, or erase the undesired word and rewrite the correct word, or I would cross it out with multiple horizontal lines and rewrite the desired word. And since this would conceal the evidence, I began crossing out the altered words to preserve legibility with a single horizontal line, rewriting the word as intended, or circling the specified alterations and rewriting the word as intended. I noticed a singular pattern in John Matthew Hurl's handwriting in combination with consistent patterns of communicating partial or incomplete thoughts, ideas, and messages. Patterns of excessive repetition as a form of overcompensating for an inability to communicate, and even a specified warning of death, and then describing the warning in such an indirect, vague, and repetitive manner that he's literally incapable of articulating a complete train of thought or message that shared identical patterns to what I'm experiencing from a discrete and subtle technique utilizing hypnosis to only partially inhibit and repress memory, as opposed to a complete inhibition of speech, which is too noticeable. The method specifically elicited direct, indirect, confusing, vague, repetitive, prolonged, fragmented, and incomplete communication patterns, which inhibit understanding and comprehension to imitate the presentation of mental illness, similar to gaslighting, which was a simultaneous method used to conceal the presentation of post-hypnotic suggestion. This was also done by phrasing post-hypnotic suggestions in the form of metaphors that were very convicting forms of evidence, if explained in detail, but the hypnosis inhibited my speech and repressed my memory to the extent I would only be able to explain a portion of the metaphor at a time so that it wouldn't make sense. And then, before we get into more detail here, I do have, let's see, so this is the FBI sample, this is, where I got the information with the FBI handwriting analysis, just going into some of the pen strokes and things along those lines. Now, I want to show you a sample here off their website. It was this one, so this one points out the variations in between the signatures here. And I mean, there's just arrows drawn to where the pen strokes are varied, right? So it's not too difficult to figure out. Now, what you can see here, this is a much different sample, but it is what I was exactly describing. So you'll see multiple patterns right in here in a very small sample of my handwriting that I recorded myself writing on video last night. So let's see, we're going to see 3 times. Okay, so this video is going to indicate, and I was actually going to writing about how to make this video specifically. So this video is going to, and then I wrote indicate various, and I was like, well, I mean, some of the basic, because I'm just covering the basic. Alterations of patterns in handwriting. I actually meant to write identified instead of in handwriting. So I crossed that out. And what ended up happening is this happened actually 4 different times. Now, in some slightly different ways. Twice on the same word. But what I'm going to show you here is I crossed out the word handwriting and I wrote identified with an arrow pointing up to it because that's what it was supposed to actually be. Now, the hypnosis is inhibiting my speech right now. So, while I was writing this, my critical faculty, or A very simple explanation for how to describe this would be like your short-term memory and your conscious awareness, right? Where you're currently thinking at the moment. Was distracted. So while I was consciously distracted, I unconsciously wrote an entirely different word than I consciously intended to. And this happened 3 times within trying to write one sentence. Not only that, it happened twice attempting to write one sentence. And then it happened 2 more times attempting to point out the corrections. Wait, actually no. Oh wow. So trying to make the correction. Sorry about that. It happened again, and then it happened a 3rd time trying to point out another correction. So that's 4 times in total because the in handwriting was actually supposed to be identified instead of in handwriting. The WI, it looks like it's supposed to be WR. Well, I mean, technically it's supposed to be handwriting, and I started writing. So when I noticed that, I crossed it out, started writing it next to it, and then I misspelled handwriting. And then I pointed that correction out, and then I tried to point out the correction right here as well, what it was supposed to say, but instead I wrote handwrite instead of handwriting. So that's one example. And then this is actually a very consistent pattern. So this was actually from last night. Now this has been going on for years. Now let's see, because I got hypnotized back in 2018, 8 different times by 8 different people. When I was writing about my hypnotherapist hypnotizing me to not drink water, I remember writing it, making a mistake in handwriting, crossing out the mistake and rewriting it, and repetitively making a second mistake and having to do it a second time. So only had it happen twice, right? And I mean, I drew some demonstrations there. Those were intentional, right? These ones. But, just to demonstrate what that would have looked like. Because if it happened more than twice, it would have been just too noticeable if it was like, a page full of just me crossing that out over and over again because I couldn't write it legibly. And this was actually also different than this, although similar, because they were both influenced by hypnosis, and I would cross both of them out and preserve them as evidence of hypnosis. Similar in those regards, but entirely different in the fact that this would have been legibility or neatness in handwriting alteration caused by hypnosis, and this was writing of an entirely different word than I intended to, caused by hypnosis. Moving on here, there's also some samples, and let's see, there's also some samples, and I go into further detail on the pen stroke alterations in handwriting in the video Hypnosis and Handwriting Advanced. I go over the different pen strokes. These are the types of characteristics: increased pencil pressure, or significant letter formation and structure variation, blah, blah, blah. And then, these are like some other examples, right? And it's very difficult to read some of these. This is going to be where I really discuss in detail. All right, these are some of the specific ones, actually, and I'm going to go over these in the advanced one. Especially because there's just other specific correlations. Now, this is the this is his handwriting. How this relates to him was it was this portion right here. I'm not going to go into the details with it right now, but you can kind of see, okay, there was some type of muscle contraction that caused the abnormality in the legibility of his handwriting, or not as much the legibility, but moreover just the overall letter formation. It's crossing over the baseline. It's increased in size. A little bit of increased pen pressure. Not too noticeable by any means, of course. But anyway, so let's see. So there's that. But what I noticed with this, especially because there's no other sample in any of these pages here, all 13 of them, and there's a large amount of them, that have any form of deviation to that extreme in all of his handwriting. So, of course, the hypnosis is inhibiting me to a profound degree to prevent me from being able to do this adequately. Anyways, so I also wanted to point out here, just there are some patterns like crossing out the words, or even most specifically having to cross out a word and rewrite it, or crossing out writing down an entirely wrong word then intended to, crossing it out, and then rewriting it. And also the pictures that he drew. So the next video, unless you go ahead and watch the advanced handwriting video that I'm going to go over later, is going to elaborate on the drawing. So I was hypnotized to draw pictures over any alterations in handwriting while I was in jail, because the pencils in jail didn't have erasers, and the drawings had very specific meanings, explaining elaborate details relevant to the context of hypnosis. The letters written by John Matthew Hurrell were much different than mine, although abnormal to be elicited as a supposed threat of death, which raises profound suspicions with multiple forms of evidence indicating a direct relevance to the... Sorry, that my speaking is strained because of the hypnosis. Direct relevance to the situation. One specific trait relating to the use of the drawing as a method of distraction from adequately articulating the letter content. Sorry about that. So not only that, I'm like, the hypnosis is extremely inhibiting me right now. So I mean, you can also see a various patterns in the drawings, and I'm going to actually elaborate on those as well. And I mean, basically what we're going to be doing is identifying whether all of these throughout all of this is caused by the same thing that caused the alterations in my handwriting. Now, I do have other samples of my handwriting here. I can go ahead and show some of those. Now, these are some of the really neat samples of my handwriting. Very few mistakes or alterations, once or twice in a page, as you can see here. These were actually hypnosis notes from my hypnosis course. Took very detailed, elaborate notes, of course. This is actually going over graphology specifically. Those are some handwriting analysis basic characteristics that you want to look, that we will go over actually in more detail in the advanced. But it's just going over in more detail on everything. So anyways, let's see. Yeah, you can get an idea. Like, my handwriting is actually fairly neat, really nice and neat. I mean, there's one letter that's a little bit bolder than the rest, but you know, you can see that I definitely have a high level of skill in writing. Very neat, very legible, very few and seldom mistakes. And then there are more examples here. In this one specifically, let's see. With this one, it was writing the wrong words entirely. Let's see. To beg and plead instead, to request to allow him to see a doctor. There we go. Or begging and pleading them to stop abusing him and telling the medical staff that, but instead this was supposed to be asking the medical staff why they were treating him as if he was violent. So this is a very specific example. Also, let's see. Upon threatening to contact the patient continued to beg and plead to see a doctor for medication. Yeah, I don't know where that even came from, for example. Also, psychiatrists weren't directly involved in this on site. This was at the time, it was psychiatric staff and nurses. So that's another example. And then There's even more, these are some more extreme alterations in handwriting, extreme disorganization in handwriting. Everything's all over the place. You can see it on both sides. And then disorganization in handwriting with incomplete patterns. So basically the speech is incomplete. And then I also have here direct, this is where we're going to be getting more into the drawings in other videos. Sorry, the hypnosis is inhibiting my ability to speak. So these are supposed to represent like legs or breaking legs or broken knees. And, you know, this was in the middle of my writing and it turned into a drawing, right? So inhibited writing, inability to write. This one has quite a bit in it. So the letter R in the word murder is bold, distracting attention from the word murder. And you can see that right here. I already described that. You know, critical faculty or conscious awareness would be distracted. So I would be distracted thinking about something else while I was writing, and then I would retrace the pen strokes in the letter R until it became bold. Let's see, letter seal and conceal in the beginning is also bold, drawing any attention away from the word murder that isn't already drawn away by the letter R in bold. This is my handwriting, by the way. Basics. More. Further distractions in the drawings as a whole, right? I mean, that's much more distracting. You can barely even see where the word murder is unless I point it out right there, right? All right, especially because right there, if I point, your attention is most likely going to be drawn to the C. So, moving on, that was done very deliberately, as well as there's also even further evidence, and I was hypnotized to draw these things because when I was drawing it, like, it almost seemed like it completely happened on accident, but it was not an accident. So, a stick figure with dreadlocks and the letter H in my name, Matthew. And you can see that right here. I mean crazy hair, dreadlocks, whatever you want to call that, right? And then you can, of course, so that's the first one, right? This is the second one. This is letter N. A second stick figure in the letter N and investigate. And there it is, investigate. So, and that one was also intentionally premeditated because I was hypnotized to think Cappy because I was trying to contact CAPSA at the time for help with a domestic violence problem that I was suffering from. I was being gaslighted and threatened and even had a knife held up to my throat and genitalia. Almost daily visits by the police. She actually even ended up getting charged. I attempted to go to CAPSA in person to explain everything, show them the videos that I had. She refused. And she gaslighted me and told me that she thought that I had a homelessness problem when that wasn't the problem. The problem was my roommate was threatening to cut off my genitalia or slit my throat. So there's that. And then, let's see, that's not it. Oh, okay, so, and then there is a river of waves protruding from the extremely exaggerated ending pen stroke in the letter R. And I was hypnotized to imagine a river roaring when I drew this. So you can see the waves right there. And then all the drawings were simply used as a distraction to interrupt me from finishing, although they are forms of evidence of witness tampering. Right there, right? And that was me intentionally making it more noticeable that it was murder. Because it is hard to see that word murder right there, right? But you can see it when I point it out. I'll go into much further detail in my video, Hypnosis and Handwriting Advanced. Okay, anyways. Thanks for watching the video. That'll be it for this one.